You don't know it yet, but her rejection might be the single greatest blessing you'll ever receive. And the moment you finally disappear, completely, silently, with no warning, that's the moment her mind will start chasing the very thing she thought she didn't want. Most men think rejection is an ending. It feels personal. It feels like a judgment on your worth, your masculinity, your entire identity. But I'm going to tell you a truth that most women will never admit out loud. Rejection is rarely about you. It's about her emotional state, her timing, her fears, her confusion. And sometimes it's about her desire to test what kind of man you really are. Women read men through their reactions more than their words. And rejection, intentional or not, reveals you instantly. If you panic, over-explain, beg, text long emotional paragraphs, or try to fix her decision, she sees a man who needs validation more than he respects his own value. But when you disappear, when you remove your energy, your presence, your attention, without anger, without dramatics, without a single line of negotiation, that silence becomes the loudest message she will ever hear. Because disappearance isn't abandonment, it's self-respect. It's the moment you say, I don't chase someone who doesn't choose me. Women feel that deeper than anything you could ever say. Men underestimate the psychological weight of absence, but I promise you, women don't. See, when a woman rejects you, she expects you to hold on, to stay in her orbit, to remain an option, a possibility, a comfort. She expects your attention to stay available because she knows what it feels like to have men orbit around her. It's normal, it's predictable. But when you vanish, when you remove the validation she unconsciously relied on, something shifts inside her. A woman's curiosity grows in silence. Her attraction builds in uncertainty. Her mind spirals when she loses what she thought would always be there. And here's the part you were never supposed to know. Disappearing doesn't just affect her, it transforms you. It forces you to face the parts of yourself you tried to outsource to her approval. It redirects your energy back into your purpose. It breaks your addiction to her attention. You stop living in the mirror of her reaction and start living in the truth of your own trajectory. Most men try to win her back, but the man who disappears wins himself back. And that's the man she eventually feels the loss of. Not because you manipulated her, but because you grew into someone she no longer has access to. There's a moment every man reaches. Quiet, private, almost painful. When he realizes he's been giving energy to someone who never truly valued it. And when that realization hits, the world feels different. It's like waking up from a long emotional sleep. Her rejection, as brutal as it felt, becomes a mirror. You don't just see her. You see yourself, and sometimes that reflection is the exact truth you've been avoiding. Because here's what most men don't understand. A woman's rejection doesn't break you, it reveals you. It exposes the parts of you that have been waiting for a wake-up call, the wounds you've ignored, the insecurities you've numbed, the loneliness you've carried silently. You think you're hurting because she said no. But the real pain comes from the pieces inside you that you hoped she would fix. You wanted her interest to fill old voids. You wanted her approval to soothe old doubts. You wanted her love to prove something to yourself. But rejection strips all of that away and leaves you face to face with your own unmet needs. That discomfort you feel right now? That knot in your chest? That mix of anger, confusion, and sadness? It's not weakness. It's the signal that something inside you is finally waking up. And when you disappear, when you step back from her world and into your own, you're not running, you're recalibrating. You're rerouting energy that was leaking into someone who didn't deserve it. Women sense this shift. They can feel when a man's focus no longer revolves around them. Not because you're playing games, but because your energy is no longer available for her emotional comfort. And here's the psychology behind it. Attention is currency. The moment you pull yours back, her mind begins to reassess everything. She replays the conversations. She notices the silence. She feels the space where your presence used to be. And whether she admits it or not, she wonders why you stopped caring. She wonders why you stopped trying. She wonders quietly, privately, if she misread your value. But this part isn't about her. It's about you learning to reframe rejection as direction. You weren't pushed out. You were redirected. You weren't discarded. You were freed. Her no didn't take anything from you. It returned you to yourself. And disappearing isn't an act of punishment. It's the beginning of reconstruction. You're not proving a point. You're protecting your peace, your confidence, your future. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize something powerful. Losing her wasn't the loss. Staying available to someone who didn't choose you, that would have been the real tragedy. There's a shift that happens the moment you disappear. one that most men never experience because they never give themselves permission to walk away. The world gets quieter, your mind slows down, and in that silence, you start to hear the truths you've been drowning out with hope, fantasy, and emotional attachment. The truth that you wanted her more than she wanted you. The truth that you were investing in potential instead of reality. The truth that you gave loyalty to someone who only gave you moments, not commitment. But here's the deeper truth you were never taught. Rejection forces evolution. Not the soft, comfortable kind. The kind that burns. The kind that strips away illusions. The kind that forces you to confront the version of yourself that tolerated less than he deserved. When you disappear, you step into a space where you're no longer performing for her attention. You're no longer waiting for her response. You're no longer measuring your masculinity by her approval. And in that freedom, you begin to rebuild the foundation of a man who cannot be shaken by a single woman's choice. Women feel this shift more intensely than you realize, because in female psychology, emotional presence is everything. Your attention used to be a subtle emotional safety net for her, even if she wasn't choosing you. You were the reassurance, the comfort, the backup option she didn't acknowledge out loud, but still benefited from. When that disappears, something in her mind glitches. She feels the loss before she understands it. She wonders why the energy changed. She wonders why the messages stopped. She wonders why the man she thought would always be available suddenly moved like someone who discovered his worth. But understand this clearly. Disappearing isn't a strategy to make her chase. It's a declaration that you refuse to remain where you aren't valued. It's what happens when a man decides his self-respect is worth more than emotional crumbs. You're not punishing her. You're prioritizing yourself. And as you pull away, something powerful begins happening inside you. You rediscover parts of yourself you abandoned. You reconnect with your ambition, your focus, your mission. You start looking at your life through the lens of a man who is building, not begging, growing, not grasping, choosing, not chasing. You realize that your value never came from her acceptance. It came from your evolution. And ironically, that's the version of you she'll eventually feel the loss of. The man she rejected is not the man she'll miss. The man she'll miss is the man you became after she no longer had access to you. There comes a moment, quiet, sudden, almost sacred, when a man realizes he no longer aches for the woman who rejected him. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, like a fog lifting. One day, you wake up and the weight on your chest is lighter. Her name doesn't sting anymore. Her silence doesn't echo, and the version of you who was begging for her attention feels like a stranger you no longer recognize. That's the power of disappearing. It pulls you out of emotional dependency and forces you back into alignment with who you were before you made her the center of your world. And once you step into that clarity, something inside you strengthens. Your mind shifts, your posture shifts, your standards shift. You stop measuring your days by whether she noticed you. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. You stop giving your time to someone who couldn't give you commitment. You stop chasing and start choosing. What most men don't realize is this. Women notice the shift before you do. They can feel when your emotional energy is no longer tethered to them. And it's not the disappearing that gets to them. It's the transformation that follows. A man who disappears in weakness is forgettable. But a man who disappears, rebuilds, rises, and returns to the world transformed. That's unforgettable. Female psychology is wired around emotional contrast. She remembers how you made her feel. She remembers your softness, your vulnerability, your interest. But what shakes her is seeing the new version of you, unavailable, focused, grounded. A man who is no longer waiting for her to choose him. A man who is no longer orbiting her life. A man who no longer treats her rejection as the defining moment of his story. She might not message you. She might not admit it. She might even pretend she never cared at all. But internally, her mind rewrites the narrative. She rethinks her decision. She reassesses your value. She wonders if she misjudged you. She wonders if you're seeing someone else now, if someone else gets the version of you she overlooked. And beneath all of that, there's a quiet question she will never speak out loud. Why didn't he come back? But the truth, the real truth, is that you're becoming the kind of man who doesn't go back. Not to rejection, not to disrespect, not to uncertainty. You're becoming the man who moves forward, not because you're trying to make a statement, but because your future is too important to keep revisiting doors that were closed for a reason. Disappearing wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of your elevation. The moment you stopped chasing external validation, your internal transformation began. There's a powerful shift that happens when a man finally understands his own value, not in theory, not in motivational quotes, but in his bones. And it usually begins right after rejection, because rejection forces you to separate two things you kept confusing: your desire for her and your worth as a man. When she rejected you, you didn't lose value. You simply lost a fantasy you built around her. And once you disappeared, that fantasy started breaking apart piece by piece, revealing the truth beneath it. You were giving a woman more emotional power than she ever earned. But disappearing creates a new dynamic, one that she never expected. It forces her to confront the absence of everything you brought into her life: your attention, your curiosity, your emotional presence, your consistency. Women don't realize how much they rely on a man's quiet loyalty until it's gone. And when it's gone without warning, without bitterness, without any attempt at negotiation, it hits differently. Because silence has a way of highlighting value more than any words ever could. But the most important part isn't what she feels. It's what you finally learn. You begin to understand that your attention is not free. Your time is not cheap. Your energy is not disposable. You stop giving emotional discounts to people who haven't earned premium access to your life. You stop trying to prove yourself to someone who treated you as optional. And you start living from a powerful internal realization. A man who knows his worth doesn't chase clarity, he creates distance. This is where your evolution becomes undeniable. You start valuing yourself not for what you can offer someone else, but for who you are becoming. Your goals sharpen, your purpose expands, your confidence stops depending on her reactions and starts coming from your progress. You begin building a life so rich, so meaningful, so full of momentum that her rejection becomes a footnote, not the headline. Meanwhile, she begins to feel something she never anticipated: the reality that she no longer has access to you, not the old version of you, not the hopeful version, not the available version. She lost the man she took for granted, and the universe replaced him with a version she never gets to meet. That's the moment regret begins, not because you disappeared to hurt her, but because you disappeared to heal yourself. And that's the quiet, unstoppable power of a man who walks away with dignity. There's a moment in every man's journey where he finally understands why disappearing was the turning point, not just in how she saw him, but in how he saw himself. Because disappearing isn't about retreating, it's about reclaiming. It's about stepping so deeply into your own life that you stop waiting for someone else to validate your existence. And when that happens, something inside you shifts permanently. You start to feel your power again, not the loud, aggressive kind, the quiet, unshakable kind, the kind that comes from knowing you can walk away from anything that disrupts your peace. The kind that isn't afraid of losing people who were never truly yours. The kind that doesn't chase what doesn't choose it. That shift is the birth of a different man. A man who does not need approval to feel grounded. A man who isn't controlled by fear of being alone. A man who chooses himself not out of ego, but out of self-respect. And here's the truth she never expected. The man who disappears doesn't come back the same. He comes back with standards. He comes back with boundaries. He comes back with clarity. He comes back with a life so full that her rejection feels like a distant memory from a weaker version of himself. And that's the man she remembers, regrets, rethinks. Because women are intuitive. They can sense when a man has detached emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They feel the absence not just of your presence, but of your desire. And nothing hits harder than realizing the man who once wanted them no longer needs them. But this is where you must be careful, because the universe will test you. The moment you truly move on, the moment you truly evolve, the moment you no longer seek her attention, that's often when she returns. Not always to choose you, but to confirm she could still have you if she wanted. And this is where your real strength will be measured. Will you fall back into the old emotional pattern, or will you remain aligned with the man you've become? Remember this: disappearing gave you your freedom. Returning to old dynamics will only take it away. Your story was never supposed to end at rejection. That was simply the chapter where you outgrew the version of yourself that couldn't see his own value. The chapter where you learned that your worth doesn't shrink because someone failed to recognize it. The chapter where you discovered that the strongest men are built in silence, not applause. So now, the question isn't whether she regrets losing you. The real question is whether you will ever let yourself shrink again just to fit into someone else's uncertainty. Before you click away, answer me this honestly in the comments. If she came back tomorrow, would the man you are now still want her? And if this message woke something up inside you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share this with a man who needs to hear the truth you just heard.